Hello. I'm delighted to speak with Chris Zimmerman, the creator of Labrynth Adventures. It's a tabletop RPG, and we'll find out more about this through some in-depth questions. Hi, Chris. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Good. All the way from sunny California, isn't it? That you're.
Yes, and it's already quite sunny now.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Now it's quite well, it's not that early in the morning for you. Hopefully it's around 9:30 a.m., isn't it?
Yeah, 9:24.
9:24. Good. 8 hours difference. Lovely. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a few questions about your product
Okay.
and hopefully learn a bit more about you as well, which will be lovely. So let's start without further ado. Can you tell me what it is that you've produced and how long you've been working on it?
Okay. Very loaded question.
Oh, massively.
Okay, to answer the first part, what I've produced is a very niche game. I've had a few reviewers go through it, and they all basically said the same thing in that my game encompasses a few different genres. It is a tabletop game, so there's no computer apps going on. This is a game that you sit around the table and play with family and friends. It can also be played solo, so it appeals to the solo crowd. And it is more of a dungeon crawler than it is a full-blown RPG, such as Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder. My game utilizes basic RPG elements within your classic party of four as you traverse these dungeon levels, which are self-generating, and you try to get from point A to point B and ultimately reach your final objective. And all of this is wrapped around a storyline. So you need a rule book to play and then a module or adventure to go on. So it's somewhat of an RPG. It's somewhat of a dungeon crawler. There's no game master required because all of the dungeon levels are self-generating. And so it creates a very unique RPG experience. Because the RPG aspects are so basic, it's a great startup system for people who are considering getting into the medieval fantasy genre tabletop role-playing games. So this is a really good get your feet wet, do I like this sort of system game. It's also a great palate cleanser for seasoned gamers who like to play the very complicated systems such as 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons and of course Pathfinder. I had a reviewer once tell me my D&D campaign likes to take a break, and we'll grind through a level of Labrynth Adventures just to clear our heads and map out a dungeon, slay a bunch of monsters, and get a slew of treasure. Then we go back to our campaign, and I said, "That's great. I'm not here to replace anyone. I want a game that's quick, fun, and easy." So that's ultimately what I created, and I wanted to keep it that way. How long I've been working on this? Okay, the original story of Labrynth Adventures, and I feature this on my website, www.labyrinthadventures.com. How it all started. Yeah, get comfortable.
Oh, I am. Got my cup of tea.
Okay. I got my iced
Was,
coffee.
cool. I was going to ask, has it got any similarities to so the old Hero Quest? You remember that from back in the day where it was a board and you had different adventures that you go on through the booklet that it came with, and you could work through those, and then they had expansion packs. And there wasn't really much role playing. It was more you'd go in, you'd fight stuff, you'd get treasure, that kind of thing.
Right. I've never played Hero Quest. I've heard about it. There are some similarities. My game does not have a game board. Everything takes place on maps, and it's a piece of grid paper. And I mean, these maps go from very basic. Here's your start, and here's your end square. So through the luck of the dice, because all the maps are self-generating, you try to get from point A to point B. I'm working on more involved quests where there's more of a storyline that unfolds as you're traveling. And I'll get to the introductory quest module in a bit. With Hero Quests, yes, it's very much hack and slash. With Labrynth Adventures, I wanted to encompass a party of four that I think many consider to be the classic party of four. So I wanted to talk about going back to when I was in 9th grade. A friend of mine got a hold of his older brother's Dungeons and Dragons books, and this was Dungeons and Dragons was now Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so I guess you could call it their 2nd edition.
That's where I started.
I'd heard about Dungeons and Dragons. Ever since I was very little, I had always had a fascination with castles and suits of armor and medieval weaponry and dragons. And I loved sitting at my desk and drawing these things. And as I got older, I remember I saw the movie Excalibur when it was in the theater, and I loved it. And my mom read to me The Hobbit when I was little. And I loved imagining this medieval fantasy world. I loved putting myself in that place. It didn't really matter what was going on. I just loved thinking about the castles and the dragons and the knights and the armor and all the weaponry. And now there was this element of magic, and you had wizards with wands, and they're casting spells and they're conjuring things. And I'm going, this is great. And I would daydream about it a lot. I really like this concept. So when my friend tells me that he wants to start playing Dungeons and Dragons and asked if I wanted to be one of the characters, I said yes. Because like I said, I already knew a little bit about it. And I said, and now I actually get to do this in my own mind. I get to be transported somewhere in a medieval fantasy realm. And so he got together 5 of us. He was the dungeon master, and there was a party of 4, and I got to play the thief. So we did this campaign from 9th through 12th grade, and we all saw our characters grow. I don't remember how many modules we played through, but when we graduated and everyone went to college and went their separate ways, we were about halfway through the series against the giants, and things were getting really tough. So from 4 years of playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, I was very familiar with what a role-playing game was all about. Now, in our senior year, and this was back in the day when if you wanted to play a video game, you had to ride your bike to an arcade and put quarters in machines. This game called Gauntlet came out, and we loved it.
When you were talking about that, I was wondering if it was like that computer.
Yeah. Up to 4 people could play at once. So you had your party of 4, and a random map would blow up, and you would have to meander through this maze and get from A to B with countless waves of monsters coming at you. And along your way, if you got lucky, you'd pick up a potion or food or whatever to help you live just a little bit longer, because this game definitely was a quarter eater. And we would play until we ran out of quarters. And I loved it because the graphics were very good for its time.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of the visual of, here we are, here's the 4 of us. We're all a different character. We're fighting monsters. We're getting treasure and trying to make it from A to B. So I told you all that to tell you this. back in 1987. So yes, I am an older man.
Me too.
Back in back in 1987, it's my senior year, second semester. I'd already been accepted to Fresno State, and so I'm just biding my time until I graduate. As I said, we've been playing D&D for 4 years now, and we like to go to the arcade game. And so I was bored in math class one day, and I was thinking about Gauntlet, and I said, how can I translate that to a tabletop dungeon crawling game? And because we were always playing D&D, I always had dice and graph paper in my backpack. And I remember taking out a piece of graph paper and staring at it. And I said, okay, I would really like to draw out a dungeon, but I can't map it myself because there are no surprises and I already know what's in store for me. So I pondered that for a long time. And then I realized, what if I made up a table and I would roll dice and that would tell me where I went and what I ran into. So I began building these tables and experimenting with them. And that's how I came up with my random mapping protocol, which is what I call it now. And it's a series of steps. You start with 2d6 and you make passage rolls and you continue to do so, traveling 1 square at a time until you come to a door, which is either locked or unlocked. Once you gain entrance, open the door somehow, you then roll for a trap to see if the room is trapped. And then you roll 2d6 for room size. And the total on those dice will tell you how many squares big your room is. And you can shape your room any way you want. And then you roll for exit doors, if any. And then finally, you roll for room occupancy, because the room will either be empty, it'll have a monster, it'll have treasure and a monster, or just treasure. Now, most of the time in my game, you're going to get monster and treasure. That's a very common thing to run into. So I said, okay, great. Now I found a way to map out a dungeon that is a surprise to me. I don't know where passages are going to lead. I don't know how big the rooms are going to be. I don't know what doors are going to be locked or unlocked. I don't know if there's going to be a trap or not. I don't know what's going to be in the room until I finish this series of die rolls. And it's really quick and easy. So I said, okay, so I figured that out. And then I said, I want the gauntlet concept with that classic party of 4. I want those 4 characters. And so from playing Dungeons and Dragons, I said, well, you have to do the classic party. You have to have your warrior, your wizard, your cleric, and your thief, which I call a rogue. That's become a very common term.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Sorry, rouge. Some people, I think spell corrects it to rouge now, doesn't it? By accident.
Oh,
you know.
yeah, you know what? Funny thing, it did that on my website when I uploaded the character sheets. Someone said rogue is spelled rouge. Just wanted you to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, good eye. I didn't catch that. So when I thought about each class, I said, okay, obviously the warrior, I want to be very strong, and he or she should be able to wear lots and lots of heavy armor, be the tank of the party, absorb a lot of damage, and hit really hard. I said, okay, I got that covered. And then I said, okay, well, the wizard's going to need spells, obviously, because that's all they really do. So I had to think of spells, and I wrote down a spell list. Now, this all wasn't done in one day. I would do this in math class and at home after school. And then I thought about the cleric, and I said, the cleric needs spells too, but the cleric is obviously the healer of the party, because you need that. And they also can't stand undead creatures. So they're always fighting the evil things, the ghosts and the wraiths and the skeletons and the zombies. And I said, okay, I got the cleric figured out. And then I said, and then finally for the rogue is the one who detects and disarms traps and unlock or picks the locks to the locked doors. And they also like to use poison. And they're the only ones who are proficient with a bow. And I went, okay, I have a nice rounded out party of 4. And so what I would do is I would be in math class and I would take out these 4 3x5 index cards. Once again, when I originally wrote this game, it was incredibly basic. And I would put these little character sheets on my desk and I would tear off a piece of graph paper. I would draw a start room right in the middle of the page, and I would pick a door and start rolling and see where the passage went and what I ran into. And the objective was, if I could fill up an entire sheet of graph paper all the way to the edges, that was one completed level. And I'll tell you, it's very satisfying when you get done drawing a dungeon and you look back at it and you go, wow, look at all of this stuff that I created. And so that would complete a level. Or by the luck of the dice, if I went off one of the edges of the page, that would qualify the level as being over. And so I would flip that piece of graph paper over, draw a new start room right in the middle, and start again. Because once again, this was gauntlet on paper. I wanted to see how many levels I could grind before everyone died or I, ran out of quarters. And that was it. That was the original Labyrinth. So 13 years ago now, I was going through some old boxes and I pulled out this old tattered black binder and I immediately knew what it was. And I went, I can't believe it. It's my game that I created back in 1987. And I went, I was surprised that this, of all the things that I've managed to hold on to over the years, I still have this game from high school. And I thought to myself, I remember it being a fun game. So I tossed it next to my laptop and I said, I'll play it, in the near future. And I did. And, as I'm flipping through the pages and looking at all of my handwritten notes, it all came back to me. And a friend of mine at the time suggested that I show it to her friends because both of them were very avid gamers. They liked the tabletop and video game, medieval fantasy type games.
Yep.
So she gave me their cell numbers and I talked to them and they wanted to have a test play at their place. So I went over one day and it was a father and son, single dad and his boy. And we sat around the kitchen table and I walked them through the rules and they got it very quickly because it was just such an unbelievably basic game. And everyone rolled up a character. And because you play with 4 characters, each of them played one character and I played the other 2. And we got a piece of graph paper and we did about maybe an hour's worth of gameplay and we sat back and relaxed and they both said, this is really fun. And the dad says, you should publish it. And that was the first time I went, would anyone actually buy this thing? So from there, I went to work. I wrote the rules down on a Word document. And I had a student from the local junior college do some artwork until I had a final draft. And then I went to an independent publisher and I printed my first hard copy. And I said, this is my game. I can sell this theoretically. Didn't know anything about pricing or marketing. I wasn't there yet, but I now had a hard copy of my game with a glossy cover. I mean, it was an actual book. So I talked to a friend of mine who's a freelance marketer, and I basically said, how do I market this? And he said, bring it over. I'd like to take a look. And I showed him my game, and he immediately said, I wouldn't buy this. I said, what's the problem? He said, your artwork is terrible. You need to invest in a decent illustrator. And I said, okay. I later got that taken care of. And this guy did a beautiful job. And in the meantime, I discovered that Amazon had their own print on demand company. So I sent them my book in PDF form. They formatted it and I ordered a copy. And when I got it, I looked at it and I said, this looks like it belongs on a game store shelf. This is a decent product. They did a beautiful job and the artwork's a lot better. So my girlfriend at the time had a roommate who was very much into medieval fantasy. He wasn't a gamer, but he had heard about this project and he wanted to take a look at my game. And so I came over one day and I handed him the rule book. He read it cover to cover, handed it back to me and simply said, "I don't get it." And I thought to myself, what isn't he getting? And I said, well, what don't you get? And he said, there's no end to it. There's no final objective or reward. And I thought to myself again, well, this is Gauntlet on paper. And so long as you have quarters, Gauntlet never ends. It's just map after map after map. And the object is to see how long you can survive. So maybe he doesn't get it. And I said, okay, well, thank you for your feedback. And as I was driving home, this is where the light bulb went off. And I went, wait a minute. When you play Dungeons and Dragons, you had to have the player's handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and at least one monster manual. So you had to have these books, but then you would buy a module. You would buy an adventure to go on, which would put you somewhere in a medieval fantasy realm with a problem or a challenge. And it was up to your party to go through the storyline and do your dungeon level grinding and hopefully win this adventure. And so I asked myself, so is there more to Labyrinth than I once thought? And I realized, yes, I could expand this game, put it in a fantasy world of its own, and start writing modules. And that's what I began to do. So Labrynth, now called Labrynth Adventures, has expanded dramatically. It's not the same game as I came out with the first draft I published. When I published that one, I was met with all kinds of questions because I went to a gaming convention and I was getting people's emails because I wanted their feedback.
When was it you went to the gaming convention?
My first gaming convention was 2015. And I was selling my first edition. I had the rule book and the introductory quest module. And people are contacting me through my email or through Facebook Messenger with tons of questions, or you didn't clarify this, or it doesn't say if I can do this or can't. And I'm reading these comments and I'm flipping through my rule book and I'm realizing there was so much that I didn't explain. So I took that book off of Amazon and I went back to work and I wrote Labyrinth 2nd edition. I said, okay, I think I'm good to go. I think everything's been answered here. A very experienced gamer also took the liberty of going through my rule book and making notes while explaining. Gamers kind of have their own language. So if you were to explain this way, instead of saying it like this, you're going to have less people contacting you saying, I don't understand. And so because I'd become an accidental...
Super important, isn't it? The way you word things, it changes so much.
Right. And because I had become an accidental gamer again, because of life and my career, I stopped playing tabletop role-playing games altogether. But yes, when he began describing what he meant, things really started to click. And this happened to be at a family-owned game store where I was doing a demo. And as I continued to go weekend after weekend and show my game, I would overhear conversations, and I got to be able or I began to learn how gamers think and talk, and I realized this guy was right. I wasn't describing things in a way that a gamer would understand. And so I began to re-edit my rule book, and that brought me to the second edition. Then what happened was I thought I was ready to go, and I wanted to do a Kickstarter. And I had never done a Kickstarter before. I made a couple mistakes during building my page. I did not think about including the factors with printing and shipping costs when I did my pledges, my price ranges.
It's very easy done though to miss all those sort of things out. I know when I've done stuff before, it's just things you don't think of, and little things, well, and they all build up. So
exactly. Yeah, once again, I had no idea what I was doing. In hindsight, it would have worked. I just would have made a lot less money per starter kit, the starter kit being the rule book and the introductory quest. But I, through the Kickstarter emails, I was contacted by a guy who went, "Hey, you didn't account for these costs. It makes your page look a little shady because it looks like you're not going to be making any money off this. And unfortunately, Kickstarter has a lot of scammers." And he says, "So what you need to do is go back, or no, you need to start a new campaign, and you need to account for your printing and shipping costs. That'll make your page look a lot more believable." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll go back and change it now." And he says, "Do you already have pledgers?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "You can't make any changes once people start to pledge. So delete that Kickstarter and start a new one." And I went, "Oh, great." Now, the interesting thing throughout this was, as I was looking into Kickstarters, it was highly suggested by many people that you want to post at least 3 reviews. And so I had sent out starter kits around the world to reputable test players and reviewers. And either they would do a video, or they would do a podcast, or write an article, something. And they gave me a lot of constructive criticism. Overall, everybody liked the game, except for one person. But I took it to heart because I already knew not everyone is going to fall in love with your game, Chris. So while I'm awaiting reviews and watching these videos and reading these articles and picking which ones I think would be best for my Kickstarter site, I'm also looking at the suggestions. Now, what I had done in the meantime, now that I had finished Labrynth, the second edition, I had a lot of ideas in mind for an advanced rule book. So what I did was I copied that Word document, and I had Labrynth, I think I called it Labrynth Extended Rules. I was starting to add new bells and whistles to my game system, thinking, once they learn the game, I'm going to unleash this. And now we're really going to take off, because I got all these cool new things, from new monsters to new magic items to new weaponry to new spells and new protocols. And I said, yes, that's a project I can't wait to publish after my game is out there. But from reading these comments and suggestions, a lot of these people were wanting either something that I already had in my notes, or something along those lines that I was thinking about adding. And so after I pulled my Kickstarter, I had a long conversation with myself, and I was reluctant to do this, but I said, in essence, if this is what they want, don't save it for an advanced rule book. Give it to them now, which meant I had to write my rule book all over again. And I thought I was done.
Labrynth 2.0.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking. And at the same time, I was filled with enthusiasm, because I'm going, okay, I can really kick this game system up and add all kinds of new stuff, and then I'll unleash it. So I contacted my graphic designer. I said, you're going to be getting a lot of emails from me. I'm overhauling everything. And by the time I get done, it's not going to be the same game anymore. So it's not going to be Labyrinth. I'm going to call it Labrynth Adventures. Real quick, the name of my LLC is Labrynth Adventures. And on Facebook, it's Labrynth Adventures. I don't know why I didn't call it Labrynth Adventures in the first place, but now I have the opportunity, and I said, it's going to be Labrynth Adventures, and I want you to start working on a new rule book cover because this is a brand new game. So 2 years later, he had it all finished, and then from there, he had to leave the project. He was doing this freelance. From there, I found another graphic designer to help me reformat the introductory quest module, because so much has changed about the game. Things didn't parallel with the gameplay in the module. And so I got with her and I said, we're going to essentially rewrite a book. There won't be too much work done. It's a short story, fortunately, but the cover's going to need to be reformatted, and I have some additions to the storyline. So once we got that done, I ordered a couple copies from Amazon, and I looked at them, and there were a ton of printing errors. And so I contacted Amazon Print on Direct, and through a series of phone calls and emails, we figured out the glitch. And now I finally have a brand new rule book that doesn't have any typos or sentences cut off, and an introductory quest module. So now I said, I am ready to unleash my starter kit again. And I had everything on my website updated. And that's when I began once again looking for reputable test players and reviewers, because I would like to launch a Kickstarter soon. So it took 13 years to complete this game, and now I'm just getting it off the ground.
That's it. That's a good long time. What's quite funny with a couple of things you said. So when I was younger as well, I had this bout of flu. So I was off school for, I think, about 2-3 weeks. I used to play this series of books called Bloodsword, the Bloodsword trilogy, I think it was. And I ended up making up a D6 game based around that. So okay. It's quite funny that you did a similar thing, but obviously you carried yours on. Mine didn't have anything to do with graph paper. I had some big sheets of A6, I think, or A2 or something, and just drew squares in it, invented monsters, all that kind of stuff. And when I moved house, I was going through all my paperwork and I found all my old books and things from that where I'd written all this stuff. And so that was quite funny when you were talking about that. It's sort of like, oh, yeah. That's quite funny. The other thing,
polish it and publish it.
Yeah, I might do. You never know. The other thing, I was actually watching a YouTube, just like someone had put on a YouTube thing about games to play if you've got bored or you want to refresh from playing Dungeons and Dragons or something. This was probably a couple of months ago, and they were reviewing 5 games, and yours was actually one of them, funnily enough. I distinctly remember him
really?
Yeah, saying about this game where you've got your graph paper, you're rolling D6s, and it does the path exactly how you described it.
Okay.
I can't remember who it was though that was talking about it, so I'll have to try and find that out.
Yeah, please try and find it. Was it on YouTube?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. Yeah, so it's quite interesting. And it's like the 5 games he was playing, he was reviewing. They were all ones that he was suggesting as good games, as a slight change or a change up from playing Dungeons and Dragons, you know, as something if you want to, exactly how you said, really, if you want to just have a palate cleanser from it.
Okay.
So it's quite interesting that you use the similar sort of words and all that. Yeah, I love the whole idea that it's like a gauntlet for your tabletop, because I used to love that game.
All right.
So that's amazing. But that's great. And I think you've kind of shown that play testing is so important in getting all these things in line. It's not just as easy as writing a load of rules and throwing it out there and hoping that everyone's going to enjoy it. You've got to kind of play test and do your iterations and then reiterate it all, and just make it as best you can, but not wait too long to get it out there. Otherwise you end up never doing it.
Sure.
But that's it. That's great to know that you carried on and you actually ended up getting it out.
Thank you.
So the next question I was going to ask, you covered quite a lot of the things I was going to ask anyway, but as far as modules, do you feel like you've finished with the modules you've done? Are they the modules you were doing for this second iteration of it? Are they all included into the whole thing now, or are you still doing modules?
With Labyrinth second edition, I had 5 completed modules, and I use the term completed lightly. Once I wrote the Labrynth Adventures rulebook, as I said, the only thing that I've done is go back and I guess you could say update the introductory quest module, so it parallels the rulebook, and there's more to offer in this adventure. It's much better than the original. I have the old drafts for the other modules, and I will be re-releasing those, but obviously with the introductory quest module, changes are going to need to be made as far as gameplay goes. I'm also toying with the numbers of levels each one is going to have. And when I finished the introductory quest module, one of the best things I thought I added was, if you manage to win this thing, one of the rewards you get is 1 unique magic item for each party member. It's specifically designed for that character class. And these magic items cannot be found in the rule book, because I have a few local loyal fans, and one of them said, "We've played your system so much, we've found every magic item there is to find." And so that's one thing that made me say that you have to offer something unique and different, so players look forward to something new and they don't get bored with finding the same items over and over. So I created 4 magic items at the end of this quest, and I said, I like that, and it's something that I want to start doing in the future. And then I said, and when you do this, never ever duplicate a magic item. There will be magic items available that you can only get if you play this particular module, because if you don't, you're never going to find anything like this. And I said, I think that would motivate me to play a certain module, knowing that there's a chance that I could gain this magic item that I'll have as long as I'm alive. So one of the things, and I have a list of new weaponry, new magic items, new spells, new potions, new scrolls, new things that you can find. But specifically for each quest module that I recreate, you're going to get at least 1 new magic item that you can't find anywhere else. So I'm slowly working on formatting the next 2 modules, and it's a 2-part campaign. It didn't start off that way, but when I finished the first story, I realized that I had left it a little open-ended, and there's an elusive person that's mentioned in this quest module. He's a very old and powerful mage, and when I ended this story, I said I had already made up this NPC in my head. And I did that just so I could better reference him on paper, even though you never meet the guy. But because I now have this character in my head, I thought, he's referenced in the story, but you never get to meet him. You don't really know what his motivation is or what he's up to. It would be nice if maybe the party got to meet this guy. And so I started drafting another storyline. And then from there, the pages just kept going and going in my head. And I came out with what happened to be a part 2. And I went, I like the idea of a part 1 and part 2. You can play them independently, but when you play them together, it brings everything together, because in the second one, you do actually get to meet the guy. And I'm not going to reveal too much, but you figure out why he does what he does, because he's supposed to be this kind and honorable mage, but you find out that he's really not. He's very chaotic in nature and not the nice guy people think he is. And so I explain why he is the way he is in the second quest module. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because this campaign, it's going to turn out great. Both of the stories, I think, are very colorful. And of course, in both, you're going to get those unique magic items that you can't find anywhere else. And when you conclude the second story, your curiosity will be satisfied, because everyone will say, now we understand why he did what he did in the first quest, which seemed like a really cold-hearted thing to do. I'm not going to say anymore, but it all came together really well. So I'm focusing on the marketing aspect right now. I am not a business major. I don't know anything about marketing. I'm a cook. I used to be a chef, but through years of doing that, I stepped down because I was tired of being at work all the time. And I don't think people realize how much chefs work. And so I humbled myself. I stepped down and became a cook again, which turned out to be a good idea, because I found this old game and I realized stepping down has given me time to work on this and mold it. So I have the rule book. I have the introductory quest module. I've had a few people review it at this point, and now I'm looking at formatting a Kickstarter, because I want my game out there. And once I see that I'm building an audience, then I will start to do this 2-part series, and that will be later unleashed on another Kickstarter.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you'd like to finish off with? How do people get in touch with you? How do people find out about your product? Where do they need to go? I will put a link when this goes out. I will put a link in for everyone to get hold of you. But if there's anything else you feel you need to say, you go for it.
Okay, and thank you. Yes, there is a contact page on my game site, www.labyrinthadventures.com. You can also message me at Labrynth Adventures on Facebook and at Labrynth RPG on Twitter. However, I'm rarely on Twitter because I still work in a kitchen and we are absolutely not allowed to be on our phones. So the only time I get on social media is when I'm home and I sit down and relax and I open up my laptop, and then I look at Facebook and Twitter and such, and I get caught back up with everything that I've missed so far that day. So labyrinthadventures.com, the site, Labrynth Adventures on Facebook. Those are the best 2 ways to get in touch with me.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to having a play on your game. We will be raffling off I believe a starter kit for it.
Yes.
Very generously donated by you. Yes, thank you. I don't think there's anything else more to say.
I think we got it.
Yeah, I think we did. And I look forward to conversing with you more in the future.
Yeah, when we get off here, I'm gonna send you a quick note on Facebook. All right, because I'm gonna order your books, and then I'm gonna also order either another copy for the starter kit, or if you want me to hold off for now, we'll work it out. But
Yeah.
right when we get off here, I'm gonna say hi to you. Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Right.
Ben, thank you so much.
Right. Let me just stop that.